Episode 3 ended up being very interesting, especially considering that a lot of people are comparing it to an Andor episode, and it really was. When you consider the Coruscant aesthetic, how much Dr. Pershing resembled Cyril from Andor, it was pretty much how you can get stuck doing a menial, boring job. However, similar to Cyril, Dr. Pershing, who went outside the lines and tried something new, was punished almost immediately. Elia Kane, a former Moff Gideon subordinate, dug the grave, and the New Republic essentially buried him alive. Even throughout the episode, they subtly teased Elia Kane's betrayal. There were musical cues here and there that were evocative of Palpatine and the Sith, signaling that she wasn't just hoping for Moff Gideon's return. She knows something more. She is secretly working for somebody that is getting teased constantly, and the final product, I think, connecting all these series will be the Ahsoka series coming this fall. These past few years, the entire theme of Star Wars has been cloning, the cloning experiments. So it's possible to understand her treachery just by looking at what everything is setting up. The Bad Batch in particular, which takes place decades ago, we are constantly seeing the Empire's cloning experiments, now with the Zillo Beast, and a lot more that was just a tease. Now, decades later, we see the culmination. Dr. Pershing was just mind-wiped by Elia Kane in order to preserve what those original plans were and where are they right now. The first time we see Elia Kane was an Imperial working for Moff Gideon. Now she's in the amnesty program, same as Dr. Pershing, and they both served on Moff Gideon's ship. In the end, we realize that she specifically targeted Pershing in order to manipulate him to such an extent that he could incriminate himself, so then he could be subject to deconditioning from the Imperial propaganda, quote-unquote. In his TED Talk, we see that Dr. Pershing is clearly talking about Palpatine's return retroactively. Whether he knows it or not, he was the main participant in Palpatine returning in Rise of Skywalker. So who is Elia Kane working for? Since we now know she targeted Dr. Pershing and intentionally stayed behind in order to sabotage this Mind Flayer process and wipe the memory clean of Dr. Pershing. Well, let's start talking about Moff Gideon, because in this episode, we are offered some hints about Gideon's whereabouts. We now understand that Moff Gideon could potentially return in Season 3. When Pershing goes back to his apartment, we are introduced to a number of former Imperials who are now reformed. This is the moment when they start discussing Moff Gideon's fate. From Season 2, we know that Moff Gideon was placed in New Republic custody. However, there are several questions regarding where he ended up afterwards. One Imperial notes that Gideon escaped en route to his war tribunal, while another claims that his escape was just a cover story and that Moff Gideon was subjected to the Mind Flayer, again foreshadowing the device that was later to be used on Dr. Pershing. While many believe that the Mind Flayer was just a wartime propaganda, this mentioning of the Mind Flayer later ends up to be true. Dr. Pershing even recognizes the device. A more quote-unquote humane version is seen being used by the New Republic at the end. With that being said, Moff Gideon's official status has not yet been confirmed in this season. His role is completely up in the air. He could have perhaps escaped the New Republic, and by seeing their status quo, can you actually blame people for believing that he escaped? The New Republic seems to be in a deteriorating status, in chaos. It's pretty much presented as a lighter version of the Empire. But if, and only if, the latter seems to be true, Moff Gideon was mind flared, then this throws the whole conversation into another direction, because now we have to ask who benefits from Dr. Pershing and Moff Gideon being mind flared, and who subsequently hired Elia Kane to do this to Dr. Pershing, because she isn't working on this alone. That much we all know. If Moff Gideon was mind wiped, then who is this secret villain that Elia Kane is working for? I think by now the answer has become pretty clear, and this might end up giving us the ultimate cameo that we are all waiting for in The Mandalorian, and that is, of course, Grand Admiral Thrawn. At this point, it might even be Emperor Thrawn, who knows, but at the very least, I think that this goes beyond Moff Gideon. Elia Kane was a valuable officer to Moff Gideon, but once Gideon was out of the picture, I think it was Thrawn who might have secretly contacted her, and she is doing his secret bidding. This is why I think the setup was perfect. Elia Kane didn't want to incriminate him immediately. She first waited for Dr. Pershing to identify all the necessary equipment and material in order for him to continue his experimentation, his DNA sequencing, his cloning experiments. Once he grabbed everything that was necessary, this is when Kane sprung into action. Now knowing the inner workings of Dr. Pershing's procedure, now they can immediately wipe him off, literally, and she could then proceed to transfer all the information to Thrawn and his own scientists. Remember, this is all leading to the sequels, where the First Order sprung up from the Imperial remnants. It's true that Thrawn is not seen in the sequels, but I think this will be shown why in the Ahsoka series and possibly even The Mandalorian Season 4 and so forth, because I think Thrawn will be killed just before the sequels begin, leaving this entire thing in disarray. In the comics, we see that Snoke was present with Ben Solo as a kid, and by the time Episode 7 starts, Kylo Ren is fully fledged, kinda. So at some point, Thrawn will be dethroned or killed off, and the mantle will pass to Snoke and Kylo Ren. This is when I think the First Order will be fully formed. It would be awesome to see Moff Gideon back again, but I think that that is just a ruse by the writers. I think that the ultimate answer will be Elia Kane is secretly working for Grand Admiral Thrawn. That will be the ultimate cameo. Now, in retrospect, after knowing everything, isn't Snoke so nonsensical, so out of bounds? All this could have been done with the original characters, at least with the original characters, because I'm not in agreement for bringing back Palpatine. Of course, nobody really is, but Snoke is just the third wheel here. Now we have to contend with Snoke being an experiment, an off DNA shoot of Palpatine. He controlled him. It is so needlessly complicated that, again, in retrospect now, from what we all know and what we all expect, is just completely nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. It would be perfect if Moff Gideon led to Thrawn and Thrawn led to Palpatine. It would have made more sense. Again, not agreeing with Palpatine coming back, but at least this would be sort of an interesting twist. Now we know that Snoke is in the midst too, so it's pretty needlessly jumbled. And I feel bad for the writers that have to put this monster all together, stitch this Frankenstein thing, and move on. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and if you enjoyed, leave a thumbs up down below, subscribe for dailies. Now you have an awesome day, Star Wars fans. I'll see you in the next video, and may the Force be with you. Until then.